I watch strangers stretch a tape across my living room and call it theirs. My name is Elowen. The house sits 3 blocks from the sound, a cedar-shingled square of light and salt air in a small Washington town where everyone knows whether you watered your hydrangeas. My grandparents built it with union wages and weekends, the kind of place that remembers hands. I moved back after my mother died, patching eaves, sanding banisters, and learning the patience of old wood. Grief needed a roof that creaked at night. This house gave me that, and a garden that forgave mistakes. My Aunt Lorraine arrived in a silver SUV and high sunglasses. She kissed the air near my cheek and parked her opinions on the porch. "We have to be practical," she said. "Your grandmother left expenses. Interest rates are what they are. A quick sale is prudent." Practical always meant convenient for her. She had not slept here since she was 19. She did not know which drawer the egg timer stuck in or how the wind lifted the curtains on days the ferries ran late. The for sale sign materialized while I was at work at the bakery. The listing photos were ruthless, stealing the soft truth of the house and replacing it with stylized cheer. They smoothed the ladder marks on the pantry door, where my grandfather penciled our growth. They staged a bowl of lemons, the universal prop for other people's dreams. By the time I called Lorraine, the first open house was scheduled. She spoke in clipped bullets. Estate, executor, market window, cash offer. Words like tools assembled into a machine that would crush a life in one afternoon. Neighbors came, polite and curious. Then strangers, brisk and assessing. A man in a quilted vest measured rooms like he was timing a race. A woman knocked on the tub as if porcelain could tell her its history. Their voices floated through the hall. "Rip out the cabinets, easy win. This wall goes." They were not unkind, just sure the world welcomed their plans. I stood in the doorway of the sewing room and kept my hands in my pockets, so I would not steady the photo frames they set at angles for better light. I felt humiliation in the small places. The way Lorraine handed me a stack of business cards from realtors, the way people spoke past me to her, the way a stranger opened my grandmother's closet and said the word dated. Somewhere between the clatter of staged laughter and the scratch of pens on sign-in sheets, a humiliation turned to heat behind my ribs. Not fury, something denser, slower, a stone warming in the sun. When the last car pulled away, I swept up the grit their shoes had dragged in. The house sighed. In the broom closet, a small hook held the brass key my grandfather gave me on the night he taught me how to shut off the water main. "For when the house needs you," he said, slipping it into my palm. Its head was stamped with a number I had never really read. I closed my fingers around that key and felt the weight of it in my bones. Practical had thrown a sign on the lawn, but the house had left me a language of hinges and numbers, and it spoke softly now. The first spark rose from that quiet. I would listen before I spoke. I would measure before I moved. News travels on front porches and through espresso steam. By Monday, the town knew the house was under contract. People tilted their heads when they saw me at the bakery, sympathy tucked behind the day's specials. Some said it would be good to start fresh. Others drifted into stories about their own closings, the way possessions shrink into boxes, the way you never find the good scissors again. It was meant as comfort and landed like a forecast I had not agreed to. The consequences were precise. A notice arrived, formal as a winter sky, stating that the property would transfer in 30 days and that I would vacate to enable a smooth transition. Lorraine texted a thumbs up when I sent a photo of the letter. She followed with a link to 10 tips to declutter before a move. I scrolled past photos of smiling women folding sweaters. The algorithm did not include a tip for what to do when a wall knows your grandmother's name. I cleaned anyway. Not because I was leaving, but because the house had been open for inspection. I polished brass until it remembered the right kind of shine. I stripped the bed and hung sheets in the cold air. They snapped on the line like sails. The garden needed weeding. I crouched until my knees ached, pulling invaders from the parsley. Work steadied me. Work speaks to worry in its own grammar. When I carried boxes to the garage, I found the old red toolbox beneath the workbench. Inside sat the usual story of a life lived in repairs, Wrenches, solder, fuses, a pencil with its teeth marks, the tape measure my grandfather always clipped to his belt. Beneath the tray lay a folded receipt from a bank downtown, 10 years old, for safe deposit rental, small box. On the corner, in my grandmother's narrow hand, was the number etched on the brass key. The connection snapped into focus like a lens turning. The key he gave me was not for a valve. It was for a box that waited all this time without impatience. I carried the toolbox inside and set it on the kitchen table like a guest. I wanted to call someone. My circle had thinned since I moved back. Grief had a gravity that pulled me inward. Still, there was Mr. Delgado next door, who had watched me learn to change a tire and left bags of lemons on the stoop each winter. There was Maya from the library, sharp-eyed, who once helped me untangle the description of a deed in a historical novel. There were enough people who believed the past mattered. That night, the house was a patient animal. Pipes thumped. Floorboards answered steps with their old wooden whisper. I lay awake and let the numbers run through me, the key in my palm, the bank receipt on the table. Questions braided themselves into something lean and strong. What had my grandparents set aside in a small box, and why was I the one holding the key? What did Lorraine know? What did that box know about the word estate? The next morning, Lorraine arrived with a contractor to pre-price repairs. The man knocked on beams and hummed. "We'll open this up," he said, making a rectangle in the air. Lorraine nodded. You'll be out before demo, of course." "I'll be here until the law says otherwise," I said. Her smile tightened. "Don't be difficult. We got a good offer. You'll get something from the proceeds." "What authority did you sell under?" I asked. "Executor," she said, as if that answered everything. "Momswell named me." I thought about the brass key, the number, the quiet weight of it. The house had taught me to keep my voice low when the wind rose. "Then you won't mind if I check a few things." She lifted her chin. "Check away. It's all in order." She turned to the contractor. "Let's talk windows." When they left, I did the simplest, hardest thing. I decided to act without ceremony. Not with noise, not with public grief, but with a small pocket of confidence the size of a key. I put it on a string and slipped it over my head, resting cool against my skin. I made a vow that did not require witnesses. I would find the box, and I would read whatever waited inside as if my grandparents had spoken it that morning across coffee, as if it were fresh bread, as if it might still be warm. I walked into Harbor Federal at opening, the air conditioned and faintly floral, the carpet quieting every step. The vault manager wore a navy tie and the careful face of a man who handled other people's thresholds. When I slid the receipt and key across the counter, he checked the number and nodded. "Yes, Ms. Hart. The rental is current." He looked at the screen again. "Paid through a 10-year auto renewal. The authorized access is you." I did not cry. Relief and its cousin, recognition, moved through me in a calm wave. I signed the ledger. He led me to the small steel door, spun a dial, then used his master to release the mechanism. The box slid forward like a book from a shelf. He set it on the table in a private room and left me alone with it, which felt like trust. Inside was not money or jewelry but paper, steady as stone. The first bundle was a letter with a blue notary stamp, dated 13 months before my grandmother died. It named me, used my full legal name, and laid out a wish that sounded like a promise. Elowen is to have the right to reside in the family home for as long as she wishes, provided she maintains the property and pays ongoing expenses. Attached was a quitclaim from my grandfather, recorded and stamped, transferring his interest to a family trust with co-trusteeship split between Lorraine and me. My hands shook once, then steadied. There was more. A typed addendum, notarized, stated that any sale required the written consent of both trustees. The addendum was signed by my grandparents and witnessed by Pastor Ames and Mrs. Delgado, names that meant bread at funerals and card tables on summer nights. At the back was a folded letter in my grandmother's handwriting, a sort of mirror of the key itself. "You are the only one who stayed when the house was loud with sorrow," she wrote. "You learned what the floorboards say. If the time comes when someone calls this house inventory, use this key and these papers. Stand still. Speak plain. I exhaled and let the room come back into focus. The papers did not rage. They did not accuse. They set out the kind of boundaries that keep a river within its banks. The law, even in its bureaucracy, could be gentle when guided by the right hands. I photographed everything with care, then slid the originals back into the box. When I left the room, Maya was in the lobby. Not an accident. I had texted her a photo of the receipt the night before with a simple question. Do you know a good property lawyer? She knew one better. She had put herself on a bus before sunrise and was now studying my face with a librarian's attention. What did you find? She asked. Enough, I said. We took a seat by the window, and I laid out the story like ingredients. She read the copies, lips moving slightly over the legal phrases. This is clean, she said. It's not even clever. It's straightforward. Co-trustees means co-signatures. Right of occupancy means exactly that. If Lorraine signed a purchase agreement without your consent, the contract is defective. What do we do? I asked. We don't do anything loud, she said. We send a letter. We notify escrow. We file a notice with the county. We ask a judge for a temporary restraining order on the sale if we must. But I think an email to the buyer's agent with these attachments will do more than a gavel. Her calm was a bridge I could walk. We drafted a letter that afternoon on her dining table between a fern and a sleeping cat. Words that neither apologized nor attacked. We attached the copies and cited the recorded instruments by number and date. She CC'd a lawyer she trusted, who replied within minutes with a line that read like an anchor in water. Stand by. I'll file the notice of interest today. I set the key on the table while we worked. The light caught the worn brass and made it ordinary again. That felt right. A power, when you're holding it honestly, rarely glitters. It sits in the palm and waits for the door it fits. We sent the email to the listing agent, and because courtesy is a kind of dignity, to Lorraine. Please see attached trust documents and occupancy provisions, we wrote. Any attempt to transfer without co-trustee consent is unauthorized and voidable. We kept our voices level in print, which is a kind of music of its own. Then we waited, which is also work. The response arrived in fragments and then in a rush. The buyer's agent forwarded the email to their counsel. The escrow officer replied with formal gratitude and a request for the recorded instrument numbers, which we sent along with PDF copies. A county clerk, efficient and kind, confirmed that the co-trustee notice was now linked to the parcel. Underneath the paper moved a current of recognition. Something had been attempted without permission, and permission was, in fact, required. Lorraine called. You're making this difficult. I'm making it accurate, I said. You're being dramatic, she said, and added as if it mattered. The buyers are nice. They have a little girl. I have a house, I said, and a trust that bears my name alongside yours. Silence is a tool. I used it. On the other end of the line, her breathing found a new rhythm. 2 days later, closing day, we walked into the escrow office together. The walls were decorated with framed photographs of keys, iron and ornate. It would have been funny another time. The buyer sat at the far end of the table, earnest and tired, the kind of people who save for years and choose paint chips with care. Their agent arranged pens like cutlery. Our lawyer, Mr. Patel, greeted everyone with a nod that said he had read all the pages twice and slept well anyway. The escrow officer cleared her throat. Before we proceed, we have a title exception to address. She slid a folder forward, precise as a metronome. We received notice of co-trusteeship and right of occupancy recorded on the subject property, as well as a requirement for co-trustee consent for any sale. Our file contains only one trustee's signature on the sale documents. All eyes moved to Lorraine. She held her purse like a shield. It's a family misunderstanding, she said. We'll resolve it after close. Mr. Patel spoke softly. That is not how this works. I set the brass key on the table. It made a small sound, a note more honest than a gavel. My grandparents left a clear instruction, I said. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to keep the promise they made to the house and to me. When I consent, it will be because it's right, not because someone set a date without me. The buyer's agent whispered to his clients. The woman looked at me, not hostile, only searching. We didn't know, she said. I know, I said. No one told you the house had a covenant with a person inside it. Mr. Patel slid copies of the trust, the addendum, the occupancy provision across the table, highlighting the recorded stamps. The escrow officer followed with a memo from their counsel. Given the recorded exception, she read, escrow cannot close without the consent of both trustees or a court order removing the exception. Lorraine's mouth tightened. Elowen, don't do this. I am doing this, I said gently. I'm doing it the way the documents say it must be done. The room let out a shared breath. The buyers conferred again and stood. We'll withdraw our offer, the man said. We don't want to be part of a fight. I looked at them and wished them a house that would know their daughter's step. You'll find a good one, I said. You seem like people who will listen to what a place asks. Papers rustled. Chairs moved. Lorraine sank back into her seat, as though the furniture was deeper than she remembered. For once, she did not reach for a new speech. She just looked at the key, then at the copies of our grandparents' signatures, a long look at the handwriting that raised her. I thought you'd leave if I made it simple, she said at last, voice dull with something like fatigue. I thought the money would help everyone. You thought speed would do the right things work, I said, not unkindly. It rarely does. Outside, the day had the kind of light that makes everything honest. We stood on the sidewalk. Lorraine wrapped her coat close against a breeze that smelled like the tide going out. What now? She asked. Now we do what the trust requires, I said. We manage the house together. Or we work out a plan that honors the right of occupancy. We put the numbers on paper without pretending the house is only numbers. Her shoulders lowered. I don't know how to do this with you. We'll learn, I said. Or we'll hire people who already know. She nodded once. The victory did not sing. It settled. Justice is often quiet as a door closing on the latch. I walked home by the water, the key warm in my pocket like a heartbeat I could trust. Legal processes move at the pace of trees, and that is often where fairness lives. Over the next weeks, Mr. Patel drafted an agreement that read like a recipe. I would remain in the house with full right of occupancy. I would pay property taxes and utilities, track expenses, and keep the place in good repair. Lorraine would manage the trust's investment accounts and coordinate with the accountant. Any decision to sell would require a shared signature and a plan that did not evict the person the house still recognized when the stairs creaked. We signed at the kitchen table with mugs of tea and the window open. Paperwork is ceremonial when it means something. Lorraine's pen hovered before the last page. I'm sorry, she said, and the apology landed like rain on thirsty soil. Not a flood. Enough. I nodded. Thank you, I said. We did not hug. We let the ink do its quiet work. I repaired what the open house had loosened. I rehung the pantry door and traced the pencil lines of childhood that the real estate photographer had tried to soften. I sanded the banister where hands had polished the grain into a gloss. In the garden, I turned soil and planted winter chard. The mornings began with light, so thin you could feel the edges of it. The house breathed in a way that felt like relief. The neighbors folded back toward us. Mr. Delgado brought a paper bag of late lemons and a story about the year the church roof leaked. Maya came by with a book about houses as witnesses, and we sat on the porch naming the winds that live in the alley. The buyers who had walked away sent a postcard of a bungalow 6 miles inland. On the back they wrote, "Found our place. Your calm helped." I pinned it to the bulletin board near the phone, which still is a cord because some things should still tether. There were hard days because life keeps its balance. A pipe burst behind the washer, and I learned to solder. The roof wanted attention, and I learned the dignity of estimates and the grace of waiting for the right crew. I kept a small notebook where I wrote dates and receipts and the names of people who helped. It was not heroic. It was stewardship, the same posture you take with grief, the same daily tending that lets time do its deeper task. Lorraine came by on a Sunday with a box of photo albums she had found in a storage unit. We sat at the table turning pages. Our grandmother's handwriting looped beneath each photograph, identifying faces by first name and pie and the color of winter coats. At one picture of the house frame going up, my grandfather is a thin line of strength on a ladder, holding a nail between his lips. Lorraine touched his face with a finger that trembled. "He wasn't kind to me when I was young," she said. "But he built this with the grip he had." "We all do," I said. "Build with the grip we have." When she left, I unlocked the small wall safe behind the sewing machine, a hiding place my grandmother had shown me only once. I placed the brass key inside, not because I was done with it, but because it had done its part. I pressed my palm to the closed door and said thank you, which I have learned is a kind of maintenance too. Spring came like forgiveness. The hydrangeas leafed out. The light strengthened. I repainted the trim and replaced a cracked window pane. Children walked past after school, arguing about things that matter at 12. I baked bread the way my grandmother taught me, patient with the proof, respectful with the heat. When it cooled, I wrapped a loaf for Maya and one for Mr. Delgado, then kept one for the house. I ate a slice standing by the sink, watching steam drift in the beam where dust learns to shine. People ask if it would have been easier to take the check and go. Maybe. But ease is not the same as peace. Peace is knowing you stood where you were meant to stand and used the tools you had. Peace is a room that keeps its name. Peace is a key in a safe and a trust in good shape and an aunt who sits on your porch without rehearsing excuses. That evening, I lit the porch light and walked the perimeter, as my grandfather used to do, hands tucked at my back, counting steps without numbers. The house responded in small languages, hinges, glass, the faintest scent of cedar, that told me it was pleased. Inside, the sewing room was warm, the quilt laid across the back of the chair catching the last of the day. If you pass our street now, you will not see a sign. You will see a place that knows its story and two women learning to read it aloud without raising their voices. You will see hydrangeas that will, with time and pruning, return to blue. My revenge looked like a signature, a copied stamp, a quiet refusal to leave. It sounded like paper and footsteps and the soft click of a key finding its home. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.